A single mother's worst nightmare unfolds when the person she trusted to care for her autistic son turns out to be harboring sinister intentions. What begins as a seemingly innocent bond spirals into a tale of betrayal, manipulation, and a horrifying act of violence that no one saw coming. This story is a chilling reminder of the evil that can hide behind a smile, and the devastating consequences when trust is placed in the wrong hands. If this story leaves you questioning everything, subscribe to Crime Chronicles for more shocking tales that delve into the darkest corners of human betrayal. Tasha Green, a 37-year-old single mother in Detroit, has spent her life sacrificing for her son, Xavier. After her husband abandoned them when Xavier was just 3, Tasha shouldered the responsibility of raising her son alone. She works 2 jobs, one as a nurse's aide during the day and another as a waitress at night, to ensure her son has everything he needs, from therapy sessions to a stable home. Life is a constant grind, but for Tasha, Xavier's well-being makes every effort worthwhile. Xavier, now 16, is a bright but socially vulnerable teenager with autism. His days revolve around routines, comforting predictability, and his love for art. He's incredibly intelligent, with a talent for drawing, but he struggles to connect with people outside of his small world. Tasha's long hours often leave her guilt-ridden, knowing Xavier spends much of his time alone. Desperate for help, she decides to hire a babysitter to fill the gaps in his care. Ashanti Davis, a 27-year-old with a warm smile and glowing references. Tasha finds comfort in Ashanti's calm demeanor and experience with children on the spectrum. Ashanti quickly bonds with Xavier, showing a remarkable ability to connect with him through his interests. She encourages his artwork and helps him stick to his routines, earning Tasha's trust almost immediately. Their lives intertwine as Ashanti becomes more involved with Xavier. She takes him to the park, helps him with his homework, and even attends his therapy sessions when Tasha can't. For Tasha, Ashanti feels like a blessing, a solution to her endless worry about balancing work and motherhood. She begins to rely on Ashanti more and more, believing she's finally found someone who truly understands her son's needs. But beneath Ashanti's caring exterior lies a secret darkness that no one could predict, setting the stage for a betrayal that will shatter Tasha's world. Ashanti Davis became a fixture in Xavier's life, her presence seamlessly integrating into his daily routines. At first, her interactions with him seemed harmless, even beneficial. She would sit with him for hours, playing video games or encouraging him to sketch his intricate drawings. She had a way of making him laugh, something Tasha rarely saw, and her ability to engage Xavier felt like a gift. But as the weeks turned into months, Ashanti's relationship with Xavier began to evolve in ways that were anything but innocent. She started spending more one-on-one time with him, steering conversations toward personal and emotional topics. She told Xavier he was special, emphasizing how she understood him better than anyone else. Her words were laced with flattery, carefully calculated to build his trust and dependence on her. Soon, Ashanti began introducing inappropriate behavior under the guise of their special connection. She framed her actions as their secret bond, something no one else would understand. "This is just between us," she would say, her voice soothing yet manipulative. Ashanti's control over Xavier deepened as she convinced him that their relationship was unique and something he should never share with anyone, not even his mother. Meanwhile, Xavier's behavior at home started to change in subtle but alarming ways. He became more withdrawn and secretive, something Tasha initially chalked up to typical teenage angst. He started spending more time in his room and seemed unusually defensive whenever Tasha asked about his day or his interactions with Ashanti. Tasha's instincts began to twinge when she noticed Xavier hiding his phone whenever she entered the room, a behavior that was out of character for her son, who had always been an open book. She also caught glimpses of whispered conversations between Xavier and Ashanti, their heads huddled too close for comfort. One evening, while clearing dishes from the dinner table, Tasha overheard Xavier snapping at her, a rare moment of defiance. "Why don't you trust me?" he said, his voice shaking with emotion. It was unlike him, and it made Tasha pause. Something was wrong, she felt it in her gut, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what. Unbeknownst to Tasha, Ashanti was working meticulously behind the scenes, isolating Xavier from his mother and embedding herself deeper into his life. Each manipulation pushed Xavier further into Ashanti's control, setting the stage for a horrific betrayal that Tasha was only beginning to sense. Tasha Green's suspicions reached a breaking point late one evening when Xavier left his phone on the kitchen counter while heading to bed. A rare opportunity presented itself, and Tasha, consumed by a gnawing sense of unease, unlocked the device. What she discovered made her stomach churn. The messages between Xavier and Ashanti were far from innocent. Ashanti's words were laced with dangerous manipulation. "You're the only one who understands me, Xavier. It's us against the world. Your mom doesn't get it, she never will. But I love you, and that's all that matters. Don't trust anyone but me. They'll never understand how special we are together." Tasha scrolled in disbelief as Ashanti's predatory nature revealed itself in message after message. Xavier's replies were filled with confusion and vulnerability, a heartbreaking testament to his innocence. He had been ensnared in Ashanti's emotional web, and Tasha's heart broke as she realized how deeply her son had been manipulated. Overwhelmed with rage and terror, Tasha knew she needed more evidence before confronting Ashanti or going to the authorities. She decided to install a hidden camera in Xavier's room, her desperation outweighing any ethical concerns. It was a drastic measure, but Tasha was determined to protect her son and uncover the full extent of Ashanti's influence. The following days were agonizing. Each evening, after putting Xavier to bed, Tasha would review the footage. At first, there was nothing alarming, just Ashanti sitting on Xavier's bed, chatting casually. But on the third day, Tasha's world shattered. The footage revealed Ashanti crossing boundaries in ways that left Tasha frozen in shock. Ashanti sat far too close to Xavier, her tone laced with a mix of affection and possessiveness as she whispered in his ear. She stroked his hair, held his hand, and spoke in a tone that no babysitter should ever use with a child. Then, the unthinkable happened. Ashanti leaned in, and what she did next confirmed Tasha's worst fears. The boundaries of propriety, trust, and safety had been obliterated, and Xavier's innocence was fully exposed as a victim of Ashanti's predation. The next morning, Tasha called the authorities, her voice shaking as she recounted what she had discovered. She provided the messages and the camera footage as evidence, determined to ensure Ashanti faced justice. But Ashanti, cunning and resourceful, caught wind of the investigation and vanished before law enforcement could apprehend her. The babysitter's sudden disappearance left Tasha and Xavier reeling. Fear became their constant companion. Tasha's nights were filled with sleepless vigilance, locking every door and checking every window. Xavier, though relieved Ashanti was gone, struggled to process the betrayal and emotional turmoil. Tasha's home, once a safe haven, now felt like a prison as they lived in fear of Ashanti's return. What was supposed to be an act of trust had become a mother's nightmare, a harrowing journey that would change their lives forever. For Xavier, who already struggled with understanding complex emotions and relationships, Ashanti's betrayal was incomprehensible. He couldn't reconcile the affection he felt for her with the reality of what she'd done. It left him lost and vulnerable, his trust shattered. Xavier's outbursts became more frequent. He would lash out, crying uncontrollably or withdrawing into silence, leaving Tasha feeling helpless. She knew she had to be there for him more than ever. Realizing the emotional toll this had taken on her son, Tasha made a difficult decision. She couldn't continue working 2 jobs while Xavier was in such a fragile state. She quit her night shift, sacrificing the extra income to ensure she could be home with him, watching over him and providing the stability he so desperately needed. Money became tighter, but Tasha didn't care. Her son's well-being was more important than anything else. She rearranged her entire schedule to support him, taking him to therapy sessions, helping him rebuild his sense of safety, and trying to create a new normal for their lives. Despite her efforts, Xavier often retreated into himself, asking questions that tore at Tasha's soul. "Did I do something wrong? Is that why she left?" he'd ask, his voice trembling. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong," Tasha reassured him every time, even though it broke her heart to see the pain in his eyes. "You're not to blame for any of this." As the days passed, Tasha juggled her role as a provider, protector, and emotional anchor for Xavier. Her anger toward Ashanti simmered beneath the surface, but she refused to let it consume her. Instead, she focused on rebuilding the trust and security that had been stolen from her son. Their once busy household now felt eerily quiet, filled with the echoes of a betrayal that left scars they would carry forever. But Tasha's determination never wavered. She would do whatever it took to help Xavier heal, even if it meant sacrificing everything she had. Weeks passed, but the weight of Ashanti's betrayal lingered heavily in Tasha and Xavier's lives. Tasha had started to rebuild their routine, though the shadows of fear remained. What she didn't know was that Ashanti was still watching them, consumed by a twisted sense of love and revenge. One stormy night, Tasha sat in the living room, reading a book while Xavier slept. The faint sound of shattering glass from the back of the house jolted her upright. Her heart raced as she quietly grabbed her phone to call 911, but before she could dial, Ashanti appeared in the doorway. Her face was a mask of fury and heartbreak. "You ruined everything, Tasha," she screamed, her voice trembling with rage. "You tore us apart. You had no right to interfere in what we had." Tasha stood her ground, her voice firm despite her fear. "What you did to my son was vile and unforgivable. You manipulated him. Stay away from us, Ashanti." But Ashanti wasn't listening. She stepped closer, brandishing a kitchen knife she'd grabbed from the counter. "You think you're protecting him, but you don't understand. I loved him. We were happy until you destroyed it all." The argument escalated into chaos as Ashanti lunged at Tasha. The two women struggled, the knife glinting under the dim light. Tasha fought desperately, her survival instincts kicking in, but Ashanti's rage gave her the upper hand. Xavier, awakened by the commotion, ran into the living room. His eyes widened in horror as he saw Ashanti stabbing his mother. Blood stained Tasha's shirt, and she collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. "Mom!" Xavier screamed, frozen in terror. Ashanti turned to him, her expression softening for a moment. "It's okay, baby. We can be together now," she said, her voice eerily calm. But when she tried to move closer to him, Xavier's fear propelled him into action. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his hands shaking as he gave their address. "Please, help. She's hurting my mom," he cried, tears streaming down his face. Ashanti realized what he was doing and tried to calm him down, convincing him that it was the right thing to do for them to be together, but the sound of sirens in the distance made her pause. Panic replaced her rage as she dropped the knife and fled through the broken window she'd entered. Xavier rushed to his mother's side, pressing his hands against her wounds to stop the bleeding. "Mom, please don't leave me," he sobbed. Tasha, weak but conscious, managed to place a hand on his cheek. "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, fighting through the pain. Police arrived moments after the paramedics rushed Tasha to the hospital. Not far from the scene, officers found Ashanti stumbling down an alley, disheveled, with Tasha's blood smeared on her clothes. She was quickly apprehended, screaming obscenities and proclaiming, "It was all for love. You'll never understand." At the hospital, doctors fought to stabilize Tasha. Despite their efforts, her injuries were too severe, and after hours of fighting for her life, she succumbed to her wounds. The news shattered Xavier, who had been sitting in the waiting room clutching a stuffed bear Tasha had given him years ago. When the doctor gently explained that his mother had passed away, Xavier froze. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't make a sound. As detectives questioned Xavier about the night's events, his words came in fragmented bursts. Ashanti. Mom, blood. His sentences trailed off, his confusion evident, but his fear and pain painted a clear enough picture. Officers pieced together his account, noting his bravery in calling 911 despite his trauma. The aftermath of Tasha Green's tragic death was devastating for her son, Xavier. Losing the person who had been his protector, caregiver, and constant source of love plunged him into a state of profound emotional turmoil. Xavier, a 16-year-old boy on the autism spectrum, struggled to process what had happened. His grief and confusion were compounded by the horrifying memories of the night Ashanti attacked his mother. Xavier shut down completely. The trauma of witnessing his mother's murder and being unable to fully understand or articulate his feelings caused him to go nonverbal. Xavier, who had already struggled with communication, retreated into himself, unable to speak or make eye contact. The boy who once enjoyed routines and small moments of joy with his mother became a shell of his former self. He refused food, avoided his favorite activities, and spent most of his days in silence, staring blankly at walls or hiding in corners. Tasha's younger sister, Danielle Green, stepped in to care for Xavier after his mother's death. A 34-year-old school teacher, Danielle was heartbroken by her sister's loss but determined to honor Tasha's memory by being there for her nephew. Moving Xavier into her small apartment, she tried her best to create a safe and comforting environment for him. However, Danielle quickly realized she was unprepared for the full extent of Xavier's needs and the depth of his trauma. Danielle reached out to Xavier's therapist, Dr. Michelle Carter, a specialist in working with neurodivergent children. Dr. Carter had worked with Xavier in the past and understood his unique challenges. She assured Danielle that with patience and consistent therapy, Xavier could begin to heal, even if the road ahead was long and uncertain. Over time, small breakthroughs began to emerge. Dr. Carter encouraged Xavier to express his feelings through drawings, and he started to depict memories of his mother, images of her smiling, cooking, or holding his hand. The drawings were heartbreaking but also a sign that Xavier was beginning to process his grief in his own way. Danielle and Dr. Carter praised him for every small step, reinforcing that he was safe and loved. Months later, during a particularly emotional session, Xavier uttered his first words since Tasha's death. With tears streaming down his face, he whispered, "Mommy's gone." The room fell silent, and Danielle and Dr. Carter fought back their own tears as they comforted him. It was a pivotal moment, a painful acknowledgement of his loss but also a step toward healing. From that day forward, Xavier's progress became more consistent. While he still struggled with his emotions and the weight of his trauma, he began to speak more during therapy sessions, recalling memories of his mother and expressing his fears about the future. Danielle worked tirelessly to support him, adjusting her work schedule and attending parent support groups to better understand his needs. She created a stable routine for Xavier, incorporating moments of joy and reassurance into their daily lives. Despite the progress, Xavier's journey was far from easy. Nightmares and flashbacks continued to haunt him, and he often became overwhelmed by sensory triggers that reminded him of the traumatic night. However, with Danielle's unwavering support and Dr. Carter's expertise, Xavier learned coping mechanisms to navigate these challenges. Slowly, he started re-engaging with his favorite activities, like building puzzles and listening to music, which had once brought him comfort. Meanwhile, Ashanti's interrogation revealed the depths of her delusion. Calm and composed, she explained her actions with eerie detachment. Tasha didn't understand. She tried to take him away from me. I had no choice, she said, her voice devoid of regret. Her lack of remorse chilled even the most seasoned officers. Further investigation into Ashanti's background unearthed evidence of her manipulation and exploitation of Xavier. Old text messages, deleted photos recovered from her cloud account, and even journals she kept chronicling her disturbing obsession painted a horrifying picture of how she had groomed him over months. The detectives solidified their case with this mountain of evidence, ensuring that Ashanti would face justice. For Tasha and Xavier, however, the damage was irreparable, a life stolen and a young boy left in the aftermath of a betrayal that would haunt him forever. The trial of Ashanti Davis became a media sensation, with public outrage fueling calls for justice. In the packed courtroom, prosecutors laid bare the details of Ashanti's manipulative and predatory behavior, painting her as a calculating predator who exploited Xavier's vulnerability for her twisted desires. The prosecution presented damning evidence, disturbing text messages, explicit photos, and entries from Ashanti's personal journal detailing her obsession with Xavier and her resentment toward Tasha. The most poignant moment came when Xavier took the stand. Months of therapy had helped him process some of the trauma, and his therapist worked closely with him to prepare for the trial. As he stepped into the witness box, the courtroom fell silent. Though nervous, Xavier bravely recounted his experiences with Ashanti, his voice trembling but steady. He described how she made him feel special, only to later confuse and manipulate him into secrecy. His testimony was heartbreaking, revealing the extent of Ashanti's emotional control over him. Tasha's family members sat in the gallery, tears streaming down their faces as Xavier explained how he called 911 the night of the attack. His account painted a vivid picture of the terror he endured, especially seeing his mother lifeless in the hospital. Xavier's bravery earned the admiration of everyone present, even as his pain reminded the court of the irreversible damage Ashanti caused. The defense tried to argue that Ashanti's actions stemmed from untreated mental illness. Her attorney detailed her troubled childhood, filled with neglect and abuse. She lacked the ability to form healthy relationships. While this defense garnered some sympathy, it could not excuse her calculated actions. The prosecution countered by pointing out her deliberate grooming of Xavier, her premeditated attack on Tasha, and her chilling lack of remorse during her confession. As the trial progressed, the weight of the evidence against Ashanti was overwhelming. Forensic psychologists testified that Ashanti was fully aware of her actions and their consequences. Her cold, detached demeanor throughout the proceedings only solidified the jury's perception of her as a remorseless predator. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only a few hours before reaching a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, sexual abuse, and child endangerment. At sentencing, the judge condemned Ashanti's actions, stating, "Your betrayal of trust and exploitation of a vulnerable child are among the most heinous acts this court has ever seen. You showed no remorse, and your actions destroyed a family. For these crimes, you will spend the rest of your life in prison without the possibility of parole." As Ashanti was led out of the courtroom in shackles, she maintained her eerie calmness, offering no apologies or signs of regret. Danielle hugged Xavier tightly, relieved that justice had been served but still grappling with their loss. The sentence brought an end to Ashanti's reign of terror, but the scars she left behind would remain. For Xavier, it was the beginning of a long journey toward healing, one he would navigate with the support of his family and therapists. Tasha's memory lived on as a symbol of a mother's love and sacrifice, a legacy that would inspire those who heard her story. This devastating story sheds light on the fragility of trust and the unspeakable lengths some will go to exploit it. Tasha's love for her son drove her to fight against a manipulative predator, but her sacrifice left an unhealable scar on those she cared for most. It's a haunting reminder of how evil can lurk behind even the most trusted faces. If faced with such a horrifying betrayal, how far would you go to protect your loved ones? Don't miss more gripping tales like this. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles and uncover the chilling truths of human behavior and deception.